Admiral Zektor stood on the command bridge of the massive warship Dominion's Pride, his four arms clasped behind his scaled back. Through the viewport, he watched the blue marble of Earth grow larger. The planet looked so peaceful, so defenseless. It was almost disappointing how easy this conquest would be. "Status report," he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered 17 star systems. "All fleet divisions are in position, Admiral," his tactical officer responded. "The Hegemony's Third Fleet reports ready. The Consortium's battle groups have completed their deployment. The Alliance's siege platforms are charged and awaiting your command." Zektor allowed himself a rare smile. 347 warships from the galaxy's most powerful civilizations had assembled for this moment. The humans had refused to surrender their technology, their foolish pride sealing their fate. Now they would learn what happened to species that defied the Galactic Council. "Any response from Earth's government?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Negative, sir. They maintain radio silence." The Admiral's mandibles clicked in amusement. The humans probably thought ignoring the fleet would make it go away. Such primitive thinking. They had barely achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago, while his people had been sailing between stars for millennia. In the tactical pit below, Commander Vexara of the Hegemony studied her displays. The massive octopoid's tentacles danced across multiple control surfaces as she coordinated the fleet's approach vectors. Her species had been the first to demand action against humanity. The humans' rapid technological advancement had worried many in the Council, but Vexara knew better. No species could leap from discovering FTL to challenging the established order in mere decades. "Admiral, we're detecting some activity from Earth's orbital stations," she reported. "They appear to be evacuating?" "Let them run," Zektor said dismissively. "Track the escape vessels, but do not pursue. We want survivors to spread word of what happens here today. Fear is a useful tool for managing the lesser species." Lieutenant Kresh, the youngest officer on the bridge, shifted nervously at his station. This was his first major campaign, and the responsibility weighed on him. His people, the Altarians, had joined the coalition reluctantly. They preferred trade to warfare, but the Council's vote had been unanimous. Humanity posed a threat that needed to be eliminated. "Sir, I'm reading unusual energy signatures from Earth's moon," Kresh said, his voice betraying his uncertainty. "The readings don't match any known human technology in our database." "Probably some mining operation," Commander Vexara interjected before the Admiral could respond. "The humans have several helium-3 extraction facilities there. Nothing that poses a threat to our shields." Zektor nodded in agreement. The intelligence reports had been thorough. Earth's military consisted of a handful of patrol craft, some orbital defense platforms, and ground-based missile systems. Primitive weapons that wouldn't even scratch the paint on a modern warship. The real prize was the humans' creativity, their unusual approach to problem-solving that had allowed them to advance so quickly. Once Earth was under Council control, that creativity would be properly channeled to serve the greater galactic good. "Open a channel to the fleet," the Admiral ordered, "all frequencies." The communication system hummed to life, connecting him to every ship in the Armada. Representatives from dozens of species waited for his words, their vessels arranged in perfect formation around Earth. It was a sight that would have broken the will of any rational species, but humans, as everyone knew, were far from rational. "Warriors of the Galactic Council," Zektor began, his voice carrying across the void. "Today we stand on the threshold of victory. The humans have refused our generous offers of peaceful integration. They have spat upon our extended hand of friendship. Their arrogance knows no bounds. But today, that arrogance ends." On the bridge of the Hegemony vessel Sword of Justice, Captain Thakur listened to the Admiral's speech with satisfaction. His crew of hardened veterans had seen action in numerous conflicts. and they were eager to add Earth to their list of conquests. The humans' defiance had become something of a joke among the fleet. How could such a young species believe they could stand against the combined might of civilizations that had ruled the stars for eons? "Captain, should we charge the main guns?" his weapons officer asked. "Not yet," Thakur replied. "The Admiral wants to give them one last chance to surrender, though I doubt they'll take it. Humans are stubborn creatures." Back on the Dominion's Pride, Admiral Zektor continued his address. "Each of you represents the finest military traditions of your respective civilizations. Together, we are invincible. The humans will learn this truth today, one way or another. Prepare for synchronized jump to final attack positions. Today, we make history." The fleet began to move as one, hundreds of ships adjusting their positions with practiced precision. The smaller corvettes and frigates took up screening positions, while the massive dreadnoughts and battleships formed the core of the formation. The siege platforms, each one capable of cracking a moon, slowly powered up their primary weapons. On Earth, the silence continued. No defensive fleet emerged from hiding. No desperate last-minute negotiations, no pleading for mercy, just silence. "Curious," muttered Science Officer Hexall, her insectoid eyes studying the sensor data. "I'm detecting no panic on the planet's surface. Communication traffic is actually below normal levels. It's as if they don't even know we're here." "They know," Zektor assured her. "They're paralyzed by fear. I've seen it before. Some species simply shut down when faced with inevitable defeat. The humans are learning they are not special, not chosen, not destined for greatness. They are merely another primitive race that overestimated their importance in the galaxy." The Admiral turned to his strategic planning staff, a mix of species that had served together for years. "Once we've secured the planet, I want minimal civilian casualties. The humans will be more useful as laborers than corpses. Their creativity, properly directed, will benefit the Council. Have the occupation forces ready to deploy immediately following the bombardment." "Yes, Admiral," they responded in unison. Through the viewport, Earth continued its slow rotation, blues and whites and browns painting a picture of serenity. Cities sparkled on the night side of the planet, billions of humans going about their daily lives, unaware that their world was about to change forever. Or perhaps they were aware and had simply accepted their fate. Either way, the outcome would be the same. "Admiral?" Commander Vexara called out, a note of confusion in her voice. "I'm detecting some anomalous readings from the asteroid belt. Several large masses that weren't in our initial surveys." "Mining operations," Zektor said without looking. "The humans have been exploiting their system's resources heavily in recent years. Desperation, most likely, they knew this day would come." But Vexara wasn't satisfied. Something about the readings bothered her. The masses were too uniform, too precisely positioned, and they were generating low-level energy signatures that didn't match any mining equipment she'd ever seen. She made a note to investigate further after the battle, assuming there was anything left to investigate. "Fleet status update," the Admiral requested. "All vessels report ready, sir. Weapons charged, shields at maximum, electronic warfare suites active. The humans won't be able to get a target lock even if they tried." Zektor nodded approvingly. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Hundreds of civilizations had fallen before the Council's might, and Earth would be no different. The humans' rapid advancement had been impressive, even alarming to some, but it meant nothing in the face of overwhelming force and superior technology. "Sir," Lieutenant Kresh spoke up again, his voice more urgent. "The energy signatures from Luna are increasing. Whatever they're doing up there, it's drawing massive amounts of power." "Probably destroying their research data," suggested the tactical officer. "Standard protocol for a defeated enemy. They don't want us to have their scientific advances." It made sense, but something nagged at the back of Zektor's mind. The humans had been too quiet, too calm. Every other species had at least attempted negotiation when faced with annihilation. The humans had simply waited. "Maintain vigilance," he ordered. "But proceed with the plan. Begin final approach. All ships, prepare for synchronized orbital bombardment. Target military installations first, then infrastructure. Leave the population centers for last. Give them time to surrender." The fleet surged forward, drives flaring as they closed the final distance to Earth. 347 of the galaxy's finest warships, crewed by veterans of 100 campaigns, armed with weapons that could shatter continents. Against them stood a single planet, barely out of its stellar cradle, with no visible defenses. "Entering optimal firing range in 60 seconds, the navigation officer announced. "All ships report weapons lock achieved," added the tactical officer. "Ready to fire on your command, Admiral." Zektor stepped forward, his moment of triumph at hand. Another successful campaign, another species brought to heel. The Council would reward him handsomely for this victory. Perhaps he would even be given governance of the Sol system, a fitting capstone to his illustrious career. "Fleet Admiral," the communications officer suddenly announced. "We're receiving a transmission from Earth, audio only." "Put it through," Zektor commanded, curious to hear humanity's last words. The bridge speakers crackled to life. The voice that emerged was calm, almost conversational. It spoke in perfect galactic standard, with no trace of accent or emotion. "Galactic Council Fleet, this is Earth Defense Command. You are trespassing in sovereign space. You have 60 seconds to reverse course and leave the Sol system. This is your only warning." The bridge erupted in laughter. Even Zektor couldn't suppress his amusement. The sheer audacity of it. Here they sat with enough firepower to turn Earth into radioactive glass, and the humans dared to issue threats? "Should we respond, Admiral?" the communications officer asked through his chuckles. "No need," Zektor said, wiping moisture from his eyes. "Let them maintain their delusions for another—" He checked the countdown. 40 seconds. Then reality will assert itself." But Lieutenant Kresh wasn't laughing. His eyes were fixed on his sensor display, watching as those anomalous energy readings spiked across the system. Luna, the asteroid belt, even from the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. Something was happening, something big. "Admiral," he began, but Vexara cut him off. "Sir, massive gravitational distortions detected. Multiple sources, they're everywhere." The laughter died on the bridge. Zektor spun to face the main tactical display as it erupted with new contacts. Not dozens. Not hundreds. Thousands. "What in the seven hells?" he breathed. Space itself seemed to ripple and tear as ships emerged from wherever they'd been hiding. But these weren't the crude vessels the intelligence reports had described. These were monsters of metal and purpose, bristling with weapons configurations that defied conventional design philosophy. And at their head, emerging from behind Luna like predators breaking cover, came the dreadnoughts. The human voice returned, still maddeningly calm. "Your 60 seconds are up. For what it's worth, you should have taken the warning." The bridge of the Dominion's pride fell into absolute silence. Admiral Zektor's 4 hands gripped the command rail as his mind struggled to process what the sensors were showing. Where moments ago there had been empty space, now an entire fleet materialized. Not just any fleet, but ships that defied every known principle of warship design. The human dreadnoughts were massive, easily twice the size of the Council's largest battleships. But it wasn't their size that sent cold fear through Zektor's hearts. It was their design. Where Council ships were elegant, these were brutal. Where Council ships showed their weapons proudly, these monsters seemed to be made entirely of armor plating, with weapons hidden behind retractable ports that now irised open like the eyes of awakening giants. "Tactical analysis now," Zektor barked, his voice cracking. Commander Vexara's tentacles flew across her console. "I'm reading. This can't be right. Admiral, each dreadnought is generating power signatures equivalent to a small star. Their hull composition... It's nothing in our databases. Energy readings suggest some kind of adaptive metamaterial that..." She never finished the sentence. The lead human dreadnought, a kilometer-long behemoth with Terra Invicta painted on its hull, fired. The weapon was unlike anything the Council had encountered. Not a laser, not a plasma bolt, not a kinetic projectile. Space itself seemed to scream as a distortion wave ripped across the void. The hegemony battleship Eternal Supremacy, pride of their fleet, simply ceased. Not destroyed, not vaporized, but unmade at the quantum level, its atoms scattered across dimensions. "Evasive maneuvers!" Zektor screamed. "All ships, scatter pattern Omega!" But the human fleet was already moving. From hidden positions throughout the solar system, thousands of vessels emerged. Sleek destroyers that moved like hunting pack animals, cruisers that bristled with point defense systems, carriers that disgorged swarms of fighters moving in perfect synchronization. And throughout it all, those terrible dreadnoughts advanced with inexorable purpose. On the Sword of Justice, Captain Thakur watched his tactical display in horror. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were executing a strategy that must have been years in the planning. Every Council ship found itself surrounded, outmaneuvered, outgunned. "Return fire," he ordered. "All weapons. Target the nearest dreadnought." His ship's main guns, weapons that had cracked the defenses of a dozen worlds, fired in perfect sequence. Beams of coherent energy that could pierce mountains struck the human vessel's hull and did nothing. The armor didn't just absorb the energy, it seemed to drink it in, glowing briefly before returning to its dull metallic sheen. "Impossible," his weapons officer gasped. "The energy readings show their armor is actually growing stronger from our attacks." Before Thakur could respond, the human dreadnought returned fire, not with one weapon, but with hundreds. Missile ports opened across its hull like pores, releasing a swarm of smart munitions that twisted and danced through space with impossible agility. The Sword of Justice's point defenses, pride of hegemony engineering, managed to stop perhaps a tenth of them. The rest found their marks with surgical precision. Explosions rippled across the ship's hull, but these weren't normal warheads. Each detonation released clouds of nanomachines that began eating through armor and systems with terrifying efficiency. Within seconds, Thakur's mighty warship was being devoured from the outside in. "Abandon ship," he ordered, but he knew it was too late. The nanomachines had already reached the escape pod bays. Back on the Dominion's Pride, Admiral Zektor watched his fleet dying. Ships that had stood victorious over dozens of worlds were being systematically destroyed by an enemy that fought with technologies that shouldn't exist. The humans weren't just winning, they were making it look easy. "Admiral," Lieutenant Kresh called out, "I'm intercepting human fleet communications. They're not even encrypted." "Put it on," Zektor ordered desperately. Perhaps understanding their coordination could reveal a weakness. The voices that filled the bridge were calm, professional, almost bored. Fighter pilots called out targets like they were noting items on a shopping list. Capital ship captains coordinated their fire with the casual efficiency of a well-rehearsed dance, and through it all, a central command voice provided updates with infuriating serenity. "Sector 7 clear. Hegemon forces neutralized, moving to assist Sector 4. "Copy that, Hercules. Be advised, we have runners trying to reach the jump point. Interdictor fields are active, but watch for stragglers." "Terra Command, this is Dreadnought Zeus. The Council flagship is trying to rally their forces. Permission to demonstrate why that's inadvisable?" "Granted, Zeus. Make it memorable." Zektor turned to see the massive human dreadnought orienting on his position. Along its spine, panels retracted to reveal a weapon that made his blood freeze. The energy readings were off the scale, showing power draws that would have drained a Council dreadnought's entire reactor output in seconds. But the human ship showed no strain, no power fluctuations. Whatever drove these monsters had reserves beyond imagination. "All power to forward shields!" he screamed. "Everything we have!" The Dominion's Pride's shield generators screamed in protest as they channeled every available watt of power into a protective barrier. The best defensive technology the Council had to offer, layers of overlapping energy fields that had never been breached. The Zeus fired. A lance of pure white energy crossed the space between ships, and where it touched Zektor's shields, they simply weren't. Not overwhelmed, not overloaded, but negated at a fundamental level. The beam continued on, striking the Dominion's Pride amidships. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the proud warship began to fold in on itself, space-time corrupting around the impact point. Zektor had just enough time to realize the humans had weaponized gravity itself before his command bridge twisted into geometries that three-dimensional space couldn't contain. Across the battlefield, the slaughter continued. Commander Vexara had managed to eject in an escape pod, and from her tiny viewport, she watched the systematic destruction of everything she'd believed about galactic warfare. The humans weren't just more advanced. They were operating on entirely different principles. She saw a Council destroyer attempt to ram a human cruiser in desperation, only for the smaller ship to phase out of reality, letting the destroyer pass harmlessly through before rematerializing and destroying it with contemptuous ease. Fighter craft moved in formations that defied physics, accelerating at rates that should have liquefied their pilots. Unless, she realized with growing horror, they weren't piloted at all. The intelligence had been wrong, catastrophically wrong. The humans hadn't just discovered FTL 50 years ago. They'd been preparing for this moment. Every piece of technology they'd shown the galaxy had been a deception, a carefully crafted lie to hide their true capabilities. A human fighter noticed her pod and approached. Vexara waited for death, but instead, the craft simply waggled its wings and moved on. They weren't even bothering to destroy escape pods. The message was clear. Survivors were wanted, witnesses to carry the tale. The Alliance siege platforms, weapons capable of cracking moons, tried to coordinate their fire on the largest human dreadnought. 20 platforms fired in perfect synchronization, beams of destruction that had ended civilizations. The dreadnought, identified as Prometheus Unbound on its hull, took the hits without attempting to dodge. For a moment, the Alliance commanders felt hope. Surely nothing could withstand that level of firepower. Then the smoke cleared, and Prometheus Unbound remained, completely undamaged. Worse, it seemed to be laughing at them. The retaliation was swift and terrible. The human dreadnought's hull split open like a flowering plant, revealing a core of pure energy. Not a weapon, but something far worse. A miniature star, contained and controlled by technologies that made Council science look like Stone Age scribbling. The dreadnought directed a solar flare across space, washing over the siege platforms. They didn't explode. They melted. Million-ton weapons platforms reduced to slag in seconds, their crews not even having time to scream. The human dreadnought closed its hull and moved on, looking for new targets. On the bridge of his dying corvette, Science Officer Hexall frantically tried to analyze the human technology. Every scan brought new impossibilities, materials that shifted between states of matter at will, power sources that violated conservation of energy, weapons that attacked the fundamental forces of reality itself. How? He whispered to himself. How did they advance so far so fast? The answer came from an unlikely source. His communication system, damaged and dying, picked up a fragment of human transmission. Not military chatter, but something else. A history lesson, being broadcast on an open channel for any survivor to hear. 50 years ago when we achieved FTL, we knew you would come. The galaxy's established powers always fear the newcomer. So we prepared. Every scientist, every engineer, every brilliant mind on Earth united with one purpose: survival. We showed you what you expected to see: primitive ships and basic technology, while in secret we built the tools of our salvation. We studied your technologies through trade and espionage. We learned your weaknesses, your blind spots, your arrogance, and we improved upon everything. Where you had grown complacent with millennia of dominance, we hungered with the desperate creativity of the threatened. You came here expecting to find primitives with delusions of grandeur. Instead, you found a species that had turned fear into innovation, desperation into determination. You found humanity. Hexal's corvette shuddered as human missiles found their mark. As his ship died around him, he couldn't help but appreciate the irony. The Council had created their own doom. By threatening humanity, they had forged Earth into the greatest military power the galaxy had ever seen. The battle, if it could even be called that, was nearing its end. Of the 347 ships that had entered the Sol system, less than 50 remained functional. Most of those were small craft, corvettes, and frigates that the humans seemed to be deliberately allowing to escape. The human fleet moved with terrifying coordination, herding the survivors toward the system's edge. The message was clear: leave and tell others what happened here. The humans wanted the galaxy to know that Earth was no longer a target, but a power to be feared and respected. In the chaos, a few council commanders tried to organize a final stand. The remnants of 3 different fleets attempted to combine their firepower for one last attack on the human positions. They targeted what appeared to be a supply ship, hoping that destroying support vessels might slow the human advance. The supply ship dropped its disguise, revealing itself as another dreadnought. This one bore the name Pacific Resolve, and its response was unlike anything seen before. Instead of weapons, it projected a field of pure force, catching the attacking ships like insects in amber. The Council vessels found themselves frozen in space, unable to move, unable to fire, unable to even self-destruct. Then, with deliberate slowness, the dreadnought began to compress the field. The trapped ships crumpled like paper, their crews' final transmissions cut short as space itself condensed around them. When the field dissipated, nothing remained but perfectly spherical balls of compressed metal, monuments to the folly of underestimating humanity. Lieutenant Kresh had somehow survived the destruction of the Dominion's pride. His escape pod tumbled through space, offering him a panoramic view of the Council fleet's annihilation. He watched numbly as the pride of galactic civilization was reduced to expanding clouds of debris and cooling plasma. A human destroyer approached his pod, and Kresh prepared for death. But the ship simply extended a tractor beam, pulling him in. He expected interrogation, torture, perhaps experimentation. Instead, he found himself in a clean medical bay, being treated by human medics who worked with professional efficiency. "Why?" he asked one of them. "Why show mercy now?" The medic, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, paused in her work. "Because we're not monsters," she said simply. "We didn't want this war. You forced it upon us. But now that we've won, we see no point in unnecessary cruelty. You'll be returned to Council space with the other survivors." "To tell them what happened," Kresh said, understanding dawning. "To tell them that humanity is no longer asking for a place at the table," the medic confirmed. "We're taking it. The galaxy has 2 choices: accept us as equals or face the consequences. Today was a demonstration. Pray your leaders are wise enough to understand the lesson." As she spoke, Kresh could see through a porthole as the human fleet began to reform. The dreadnoughts moved back into defensive positions around Earth, but now he understood they were just the visible portion of humanity's strength. Who knew how many more ships waited in hidden bases throughout the system? How many weapons remained unveiled? How many technologies had the humans yet to reveal? The Council had come to Sol expecting to crush an upstart species. Instead, they had awakened a sleeping giant, one that had spent 50 years turning paranoia into preparation, fear into focus, isolation into innovation. The galaxy would never be the same. The Grand Council chamber on Nexus Prime had never been so quiet. Representatives from 100 civilizations sat in stunned silence as the holographic recordings played out before them. The Battle of Sol, as historians would later call it, unfolded in merciless detail. Every ship destroyed, every impossible weapon deployed, every assumption shattered. Council Prime Executor Shektan, ancient even by galactic standards, watched the final moments of Admiral Zektor's flagship with what passed for disbelief on her crystalline features. In her 1,000 years of life, she had never witnessed such a complete reversal of fortune. "Turn it off," she finally commanded, her harmonious voice discordant with stress. The recording froze on an image of Earth, now surrounded by its revealed fleet. The human dreadnoughts hung in space like metal gods, their presence a clear message to anyone who might threaten their world. But it was the smaller ships, the thousands of vessels that had hidden throughout the system, that truly conveyed the depth of humanity's preparation. "How many survivors?" Shektan asked. 47 ships returned, reported the hegemony representative, his usual arrogance replaced by naked fear. "Less than 3,000 individuals from a force of over 1 million. The humans were selective in their mercy." Commander Vexara stood in the center of the chamber, still wearing the emergency suit from her escape pod. As the highest-ranking military survivor, she had been chosen to deliver the official report. Her tentacles trembled slightly as she spoke. "Honored counselors, what we witnessed was not a battle. It was a demonstration. The humans allowed us to live solely to deliver a message. They possess technologies we cannot counter, strategies we cannot predict, and most terrifying of all, the will to use them." "Surely you exaggerate," interrupted the Altarian delegate. "No species advances that quickly. It violates every known model of technological progression." Vexara's chromatic skin flushed with anger. "I watched the eternal supremacy, our most advanced warship, get erased from existence by a weapon that attacked the quantum foam itself. I saw fighters moving at accelerations that would liquefy any biological pilot, except they needed no pilots at all. I witnessed dreadnoughts shrug off weapons that crack moons as if they were raindrops. There is no exaggeration sufficient to convey the reality of human capabilities." Lieutenant Kresh, standing with the other survivors, raised a trembling hand. "May I address the council?" Shektan nodded, and the young officer stepped forward. His species valued truth above all else, and his words carried weight despite his low rank. "The humans told us something during our captivity. They said they studied us for 50 years. Not just our technology, but our psychology, our politics, our arrogance. They knew we would come for them eventually, so they prepared for every scenario. While we debated whether they were a threat, they were building weapons designed specifically to counter ours." "And these weapons," the consortium's speaker asked, "what exactly did they use?" "Everything," Kresh replied simply. "Weaponized gravity wells, directed solar flares, quantum destabilization beams, adaptive armor that feeds on energy attacks, fighters that phase in and out of our reality, nanomachine swarms that devour ships in seconds. But the worst part? The humans call these their defensive systems. We never saw what they consider offensive weapons." A ripple of fear passed through the chamber. If those horrors were merely defensive. Science Officer Hexall limped forward on damaged legs, his insectoid features drawn with exhaustion. "I managed to analyze some of their technology during the battle. The power sources alone defy our understanding. Each dreadnought contains what appears to be a controlled singularity, possibly even a captured microstar. The energy output is orders of magnitude beyond anything in Council space. How? Demanded the Alliance speaker. Our scientists say such things are impossible. Our scientists have grown complacent, Hexall replied bitterly. We've had the same basic technologies for millennia, making only incremental improvements. The humans approached everything from first principles, unencumbered by our assumptions about what was impossible. They succeeded because they didn't know they were supposed to fail. Shekton raised a crystalline hand for silence. The implications were clear and terrifying. Humanity hadn't just won a battle, they had revealed the Council's fundamental weakness. Centuries of dominance had bred stagnation, while Earth's isolation had fostered innovation. What do they want? She asked finally. A new voice echoed through the chamber, transmitted from outside. Perhaps I can answer that. The main view screen activated, showing a human face. The woman appeared middle-aged by human standards, with silver streaking her dark hair. She wore a simple uniform with no rank insignia, but her bearing suggested authority. I am Director Sarah Chen, speaking for Earth Defense Command, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. We've been monitoring your session. With your permission, I would like to address the Council directly. Shekton looked around the chamber, seeing no objections, only fear and curiosity. Speak, Director Chen. Thank you. First, let me be clear. Humanity has no interest in conquest or revenge. We simply want to exist without threat, to grow without interference, to explore the galaxy without fear of extermination because we're different. You destroyed our fleet, the hegemony representative accused. Your fleet came to destroy us, Chen replied calmly. We defended ourselves. Notice that we allowed survivors. Notice that we treated them with dignity. Notice that we're talking now instead of sending our fleet to your worlds. We chose restraint. Remember that. What are your terms? Shekton asked, cutting to the heart of the matter. Simple. Recognize Earth's sovereignty. Grant humanity full member status in the Galactic Council with all associated rights and protections. Cease all hostile actions against human colonies and vessels. In return, we will share some of our technology, contribute to galactic defense, and help revitalize the scientific stagnation that has gripped Council space. And if we refuse? Someone called out. Chen's expression hardened. Then you'll learn what our offensive capabilities look like. The fleet you saw represents perhaps 10% of our military strength. We have weapons we hoped never to use, technologies that make our dreadnoughts look like toys. Do not force us to demonstrate them. The threat hung in the air like a physical presence. Every representative could imagine human fleets appearing above their homeworlds, deploying weapons that turned reality itself into a tool of war. We need time to discuss this, Shekton said. You have 72 hours, Chen replied. After that, we'll assume you've chosen conflict and act accordingly. For what it's worth, we hope you choose wisely. Humanity has much to offer the galaxy, if you'll let us. The transmission ended, leaving the Council in chaos. Some called for immediate acceptance of human terms, terrified of further conflict. Others demanded time to rebuild, to find ways to counter human technology. A few even suggested attempting to ally with humanity's enemies, though none could name any. In the end, it was the survivors who swayed the debate. One by one, they stood and shared their experiences. The casual ease with which humanity had destroyed the greatest fleet ever assembled. The technologies that defied understanding. The mercy shown to prisoners, proving humanity capable of both overwhelming force and remarkable restraint. Captain Thakur, who had somehow survived his ship's destruction, spoke last. Half his body was covered in medical gel from human treatments that had saved his life. I've fought in 37 campaigns, he said slowly. "I've seen civilizations rise and fall, but I've never seen anything like what happened at Sol. They didn't just defeat us, they made it look effortless. And the worst part? I believe they were holding back. If we force another confrontation, there won't be survivors to warn the next fools." The debate raged for hours, but the outcome was inevitable. Fear, that most primal emotion, won out over pride. The vote was called, and for the first time in Council history, it was unanimous. Humanity would be granted full membership with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. Director Chen appeared again when informed of the decision. This time she smiled. "Thank you for your wisdom. As a gesture of good faith, we'll begin sharing some of our medical technology immediately. I believe you'll find our advances in regenerative therapy particularly interesting. Welcome to a new era of cooperation." "Director," Shekton said carefully, "may I ask a question?" "Of course." "Why reveal yourselves now? You could have remained hidden, building your strength in secret." Chen's smile turned sad. "Because isolation breeds stagnation as surely as dominance does. We've taken our technology as far as we can alone. To grow further, we need the diverse perspectives of the galactic community. We need your 1,000 different ways of thinking, your 1,000,000 different approaches to problems. Together, we can achieve things neither of us could accomplish alone." "And if we betray this trust?" Shekton had to ask. "Then you'll discover that everything you've seen was indeed just our defensive systems," Chen said simply. "But I have faith you won't. Fear brought you to our door with warships. Let wisdom guide what happens next." In the weeks that followed, human ships began appearing at Council worlds. Not warships, but cargo vessels carrying medical supplies, scientific equipment, and offers of technological exchange. The dreadnoughts remained at Sol, silent guardians ensuring no one forgot the lesson learned there. Human scientists attended council conferences, sharing insights that sparked renaissance in fields stagnant for centuries. Human doctors introduced treatments that extended lifespans and cured diseases thought incurable. Human engineers proposed megastructures that would harness the power of stars for peaceful purposes. But always, in the background, was the knowledge of what humanity could do if threatened. The recordings of the Battle of Sol became required viewing at every military academy, a stark reminder that assumptions and arrogance led only to destruction. Commander Vexara, promoted for her survival and accurate reporting, found herself working alongside human military advisors. She learned that the entire human fleet was volunteer-based, citizens who had chosen to defend their world rather than conscripts forced into service. It explained their coordination, their dedication, their willingness to spend decades preparing for a threat that might never come. "We knew you were coming," her human counterpart, Admiral Singh, told her one day. "The moment we achieved FTL and detected the galactic community, we knew. History taught us what happens to the newcomer, the different, the threatening. So we prepared for war while hoping for peace." "All of this in 50 years, Vexara said, still struggling to believe it. 50 years of united purpose, Singh confirmed. Every nation on Earth, every corporation, every brilliant mind working toward survival. We set aside our differences because the alternative was extinction. Fear of you made us strong. Now perhaps friendship can make us wise." Lieutenant Kresh became an ambassador, one of the first non-humans to live on Earth. He walked the streets of humanity's cities, no longer seeing primitives but a species that had turned existential threat into evolutionary pressure. He studied at their universities, learning that human creativity came from their short lifespans, their desperation to achieve something meaningful in their brief time. He stood one day in the Museum of the Sol Defense, looking at exhibits showing humanity's secret preparation. Children on school trips laughed and pointed at the displays, treating the desperate years as ancient history. For them, The galaxy was full of friends and possibilities, not threats. But in the military sections of the museum, Kresh saw the truth. Weapons that had never been deployed, technologies held in reserve, plans for contingencies that made the Battle of Sol look like a minor skirmish. Humanity had shown mercy, but they had not shown all their cards. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson. Earth was no longer a target, but a partner. No longer prey, but predator turned protector. The humans took their place in the council, bringing fresh perspectives and revolutionary technologies. Trade flowed, cultures mixed, and a new golden age began. But in the depths of space, around Sol and throughout human territory, the dreadnoughts maintained their vigil. Silent reminders that humanity's friendship was a choice, not a weakness. That the species which had shocked the galaxy once could do so again, if necessary. The Galactic Council had declared victory that day at Sol, confident in their superiority and the inevitability of human submission. They had been right about the victory, wrong about who would claim it. Earth's dreadnoughts had appeared at the perfect moment, turning certain defeat into overwhelming triumph. Now, as human and alien worked side by side to unlock the universe's mysteries, only one question remained. Not whether humanity belonged among the stars, but how far they would rise. The galaxy watched with mixed anticipation and apprehension as Earth's children reached for heights undreamed of. For humanity had learned the greatest lesson of all. In a universe full of ancient powers and established orders, innovation and determination could overcome any odds. They had faced extinction and emerged not just victorious but transformed. The primitive newcomers had become the teachers, showing the galaxy that stagnation was the true enemy. And in the void between stars, the dreadnoughts waited, patient, ready. A promise and a warning written in metal and might. Humanity had arrived, and the universe would never be the same. The Zalathi fleet hung in space above Kepler-4 like bloated metal ticks, gorged on their recent victory. Admiral Gurzon relaxed in his command throne, his slug-like form pulsing with satisfaction. The pathetic human mining station was nothing but expanding debris now, a glittering reminder of what happened to those who defied the Council's will. "Admiral," his sensor officer reported, "we're detecting an energy signature approaching through subspace." "Human reinforcements?" Gurzon gurgled with amusement. "How many of their primitive vessels dare to challenge us?" "Just one, sir. It appears to be—" "Wait. These readings can't be correct." "What is it?" "The energy output is impossible. It's exceeding our sensor's maximum range." Gurzon's 4 eyes narrowed. "Recalibrate the—" Space tore open. It wasn't the smooth transition of a standard hyperspace exit. This was violent, reality itself screaming in protest as something forced its way through. The Perseverance emerged like a knife cutting through silk, dimensional energies crackling around its hull. Every alarm on the Zalathi bridge erupted simultaneously. "Admiral, that's not any human ship in our database!" Gurzon stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The human vessel was smaller than his dreadnoughts, but radiated power signatures that made no sense. Its hull seemed to shimmer, as if it existed in multiple dimensions at once. A communication channel opened. The human woman on the screen wore a uniform Gurzon didn't recognize, sleek, black, with no unnecessary ornamentation. "Zalathi Fleet, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the UNS Perseverance. You are guilty of mass murder. You have one opportunity to surrender. You have 60 seconds to comply." Gurzon's throat sac inflated with rage. "Insolent mammal! You dare threaten a council fleet? Fire all weapons!" 3 Zalathi dreadnoughts opened fire simultaneously. Hundreds of plasma bolts and antimatter missiles streaked toward the human ship. They never made contact. The Perseverance didn't dodge. It didn't raise shields. Instead, space around it simply shifted. The incoming fire hit regions of warped space-time and ceased to exist, deleted from reality as if they had never been fired. 45 seconds, Captain Chen said calmly. Impossible, Gurzon screamed. Concentrate fire, all ships. The entire Zalathi fleet, 3 dreadnoughts, 6 cruisers, 12 destroyers, unleashed everything they had. The space around Kepler-4 lit up like a star being born. Enough firepower to crack a moon poured toward the lone human vessel. The Perseverance remained untouched. 30 seconds. On the human bridge, Lieutenant Park turned to his captain. They're putting up a decent light show. Tanaka, have you finished analyzing their shields? Yes, Captain. Standard Council configuration. They haven't updated their defensive systems in 300 years. Typical. Sarah's expression remained cold. How many life signs on their ships? Approximately 12,000 across the fleet. 12,000 beings who chose to follow orders to murder civilians. She stood up. Park, target their engines and weapons only. I want them alive but helpless. 15 seconds, she announced to the Zalathi. Gurzon's certainty crumbled as his weapons proved useless. Get us out of here. Emergency jump. Sir, our navigation systems are being jammed. Something is interfering with local space-time. 5 seconds. This is impossible. Humans don't have this technology. Time's up, Sarah said. Fire. The Perseverance struck. Gutson would later describe it to the Council investigators as watching reality break. Beams of twisted light erupted from the human ship, not plasma, not lasers, but something that made physics weep. Where they touched Zalathi hulls, matter simply ceased. No explosion, no debris. Perfect circles of nothingness appeared in his ships. In 3 seconds, every weapon system in the Zalathi fleet was gone. In 5 seconds, their engines followed. In 7 seconds, their shields collapsed as their generators vanished from existence. The mighty Zalathi fleet, terror of a dozen systems, hung dead in space. What? What are you? Gurzon whispered. We're humans, Sarah replied. The species you thought was weak. The people you murdered for profit. She paused. And this is just one ship. As if summoned by her words, 3 more tiers in reality opened. The Vengeance, Retribution, and Nemesis emerged, each as impossible as the Perseverance. On Earth, the transformation was even more dramatic. Hidden cities revealed themselves, their dimensional cloaking fields dropping. The moon's surface rippled and changed as massive weapon installations came online. Mars showed its true face, not a struggling colony, but a fortress world bristling with defenses. In the council chambers, chaos reigned. Delegates screamed at each other, demanding answers. How had the humans hidden this? Where did this technology come from? The answer was simple and terrifying. Humanity had never stopped preparing for war. While the council grew fat and complacent, secure in their technological superiority, humans had pushed the boundaries of science in secret. Every peaceful gesture had been a cover. Every trade agreement had been intelligence gathering. Every friendship had been studying potential enemies, and they had learned well. Ambassador Rodriguez returned to the chamber, but he wasn't alone. A full squad of human marines followed him, their armor seeming to bend light around it. They moved with predatory grace, weapons that hummed with barely contained energy held at ready. Ladies and gentlemen of the council, Rodriguez announced, his voice carrying over the panic. I've been instructed to deliver humanity's terms. Terms? The Vorthon delegate's mandibles clicked furiously. You dare make demands of the Galactic Council? We're not making demands, Rodriguez corrected. We're stating facts. Fact 1. Your unprovoked attack on our mining station constituted an act of war under your own laws. Fact 2. You no longer possess the military superiority to enforce your will. Fact 3. Humanity is prepared to demonstrate this reality to any species that doubts it. To emphasize his point, Rodriguez activated a holographic display. It showed the Kepler system in real time. The Zalathi fleet drifted helplessly while human ships circled them like sharks. "This can't be happening," the Korvax representative's gaseous form flickered with agitation. "The humans are primitives. Their ships use fusion drives. Their weapons are projectile-based." "Were," Rodriguez smiled. "Past tense. Did you really think we'd show you our true capabilities? That we'd trust species who had conquered and subjugated dozens of younger races?" The truth hit the Council like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't trusted them, had never trusted them. Every smile had hidden calculation. Every gesture of friendship had been studying weakness. "You deceived us," the Vorthon accused. "You betrayed us," Rodriguez countered. "You took our good faith efforts at diplomacy and answered with murder. So now you get to see what we really are." More displays appeared, showing human fleets emerging throughout the galaxy, hidden bases revealing themselves, sleeper ships that had been drifting innocuously for years, powering up weapons that defied understanding. Every trade route, every diplomatic mission, every cultural exchange. Rodriguez's voice grew harder. "We mapped your defenses. We studied your technologies. We prepared for the day one of you would do exactly what you did today." The Zalathi delegate had remained silent, watching the feed from Kepler. Finally, it spoke. What will you do to our fleet?" "Nothing," Rodriguez replied. "They'll drift there, helpless, until you send unarmed rescue ships to collect them. Consider it mercy, more than you showed our miners. And then the real negotiations begin. Humanity is claiming the Kepler system and a 100-light-year exclusion zone around it. Any council ship entering without permission will be considered hostile." "Preposterous!" The Vorthon slammed a claw on its desk. "The Council will never—" "The Council will agree," Rodriguez interrupted. "Because the alternative is war with a species that just revealed it can delete your ships from existence. A species that's been preparing for that war for a decade." He gestured to the Marines. "These soldiers, their armor uses dimensional phase technology. Your weapons can't touch them. Their rifles fire micro-singularities. Your shields can't stop them, and there are billions more where they came from." The chamber fell silent except for the hum of alien life support systems. "But," Rodriguez continued, his tone softening slightly, "humanity doesn't want war. We wanted peace. We still want peace. But it will be peace on equal terms, not as your servants or subjects." "What are your full terms?" the Korvax asked, its form stabilizing as it accepted the new reality. Rodriguez activated another display, showing a star map. The Kepler system and its exclusion zone, full reparations for the destroyed station and murdered colonists, a seat on the Council's Security Committee, and immediate cessation of all civilization uplifting programs that are really just disguised conquest. "And if we refuse?" "Then you run," Rodriguez said simply. "Because we've spent 10 years mapping every weakness, every defensive gap, every soft target in Council space. Your home worlds, your colonies, your fleets, we know them all. And unlike you, we don't bluff." The weight of realization crashed down on the delegates. They had poked what they thought was a harmless newcomer. Instead, they had awakened a prepared, patient, and now thoroughly angry predator. On a dozen worlds, similar scenes played out. Human ambassadors, previously seen as eager to please diplomats, revealed steel spines and detailed intelligence. Human traders admitted to being intelligence officers. Human students confessed to studying alien weaknesses. The species that had smiled and nodded for a decade showed its teeth. But perhaps the most terrifying revelation came from the human military attaché on the Council station. Colonel Marcus Webb had been seen as a jovial, slightly incompetent officer who spent more time socializing than working. Now he stood before the Council's military leadership, and there was nothing jovial about him. "Gentlemen," he began, I've been asked to explain human military doctrine to prevent any misunderstandings. The Zalathi Supreme Commander, still reeling from the loss of his fleet, managed to ask, "What doctrine?" Overwhelming response, Webb replied. "You see, on Earth, we have a saying, if you come at the king, you best not miss. You came at us. You missed." He activated a tactical display showing Council military positions throughout the galaxy. Red markers appeared next to each one, human ships that had been hiding, waiting. "We could destroy every military asset you have in 72 hours, Webb stated matter-of-factly. "Your shipyards, your defensive platforms, your ground forces, all of it." "That's impossible," the Vorthon military leader clicked. "Even with your technology, we have singularity bombs pre-positioned in the coronas of your stars," Webb interrupted. "Installed years ago during cultural exchange missions. One command, and your sons go nova." The room temperature seemed to drop. "You're insane," someone whispered. "No," Webb corrected. "We're human. We're the species that evolved on a death world, that survived ice ages, supervolcanoes, and each other. Did you think we'd forget those lessons just because we reached the stars?" He shut off the display. "But we're also the species that invented mercy, that values peace. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to accept our terms. You're going to leave us alone, and we're going to pretend this unpleasantness never happened." "And if we don't?" Webb's smile was all teeth. "Then you run. You run far and fast and hope we decide you're not worth pursuing. Because when humans hunt, we don't stop. Ever." The revelation of humanity's true nature spread through the galaxy like wildfire. The young, eager species that had joined the Council 10 years ago was a mask. Beneath it was something far older and more dangerous, a predator that had learned to hide its claws. Some species called for immediate war. Others counseled acceptance. The debate raged for days. But in the end, the images from Kepler decided it. The mighty Zalathi fleet, reduced to drifting hulks in minutes by a single human ship. Technology that violated the Council's understanding of physics. Weapons that deleted matter from existence. And the humans' single-word response echoed in every discussion. Run. It wasn't a threat, it was advice. The kind a predator gives prey when it's feeling merciful. The Council voted to accept humanity's terms. As news of the agreement spread, human ships across the galaxy powered down their weapons. Hidden bases re-engaged their cloaking fields. The mask of peaceful cooperation slipped back on. But something fundamental had changed. The other species now knew what lurked behind human smiles. They had seen the steel beneath the silk, the predator beneath the diplomat. Humanity had wanted to be friends. The Council had forced them to be monsters. Now they would have to live with the consequences. 5 years had passed since the day the galaxy learned to fear humanity. The Kepler system had transformed from a simple mining operation into a fortress that defied comprehension. Where once 3 small stations had orbited the planets, now massive constructs of impossible geometry hung in space. They weren't just defensive platforms. They were statements, reminders of what happened when humanity was pushed too far. Captain Sarah Chen, now Admiral Chen, stood on the observation deck of Kepler Station Prime. Through the transparent aluminum windows, she watched human and alien ships moving through carefully designated transit corridors. The exclusion zone was absolute. Cross it without permission, and you simply ceased to exist. "The Vorthon ambassador is here for his appointment," her aide, Commander Park, announced. "Send him in." The Vorthon who entered was different from the arrogant creature she remembered from the old Council recordings. Its crystalline exoskeleton was dulled, its movements careful and respectful. Amazing what a reality check could accomplish. "Admiral Chen," it clicked its mandibles in what passed for a nervous greeting. "Thank you for agreeing to see me. Ambassador Krextel, What brings you to human space? The Vorthan's 4 arms twitched. I come with a proposal, or perhaps a plea. Sarah raised an eyebrow but said nothing, letting the silence stretch. Another thing the aliens had learned. Humans were masters of psychological warfare. The Skarn hegemony, Krextel finally continued. They're expanding again. 3 systems have fallen in the last month. The Council military is insufficient. And we need your help. Sarah leaned back in her chair. 5 years ago, this same species had laughed at humanity's protests, had endorsed the murder of 800 civilians. Now they came begging for protection. The Council made it very clear that humanity's place was at the bottom, she said evenly. Why should we care about your problems? Because you're better than us, Krextel admitted, the words clearly painful. Because despite what we did, you showed mercy. Your response could have been genocide. Instead, you simply contained us. It was true. After the initial demonstration, humanity hadn't pressed their advantage. They'd taken their exclusion zone, demanded their seat on the security committee, and then stopped. No conquest, no retribution beyond what they'd claimed. But the threat remained. Every species in the galaxy knew that humanity could end them if pushed. The humans had returned to their masks of diplomacy and trade, but now everyone could see the weapons beneath the silk. Tell me about the Skarn, Sarah commanded. Krextel activated a holographic display. The Skarn were a militant species from beyond Council space, conquerors who consumed resources and moved on. They had technology comparable to the Council's traditional forces, which meant they were centuries behind humanity. They've never encountered humans? Sarah asked. No, they're from the far rim. They probably think you're just another Council species. A dangerous smile crossed Sarah's face. Park, send a message to Earth. Tell them the Skarn hegemony is about to learn why the Council fears us. The response came within hours. Not a massive fleet, not an armada of dreadnoughts, just 3 ships, the UNS Consequence, Reckoning, and Final Notice. 3 ships to face an empire that had conquered 100 worlds. The Skarn never stood a chance. The battle, if it could be called that, took place in the Thessian system, the latest target of Skarn expansion. Hundreds of Skarn vessels, each bristling with weapons, faced off against 3 human ships that seemed almost delicate in comparison. Admiral Vexnar of the Skarn fleet was confident. These new aliens might have intimidated the weak Council species, but the Skarn were warriors. They had never met an enemy they couldn't destroy. Attention human vessels, Vexnar broadcast. You will power down and surrender or be destroyed. You have 1 minute to... Space screamed. The UNS Consequence didn't fire weapons in any conventional sense. Instead, it reached out with invisible hands and began unmaking reality around the Skarn ships. Crews watched in horror as sections of their vessels simply stopped existing, deleted from the universe with surgical precision. The Reckoning took a different approach. It fired missiles that phased through shields and armor as if they weren't there, detonating inside Skarn ships with yields that turned matter into exotic particles. Ships didn't explode. They transformed into brief-lived stars. The Final Notice was perhaps the most terrifying. It did nothing visible at all, but Skarn ships near it simply stopped. Their crews fell unconscious. Their systems shut down, their weapons powered off. Later analysis would show their atoms had been quantum-locked, frozen in time. In 12 minutes, the Skarn fleet was gone, not destroyed. That would have been merciful. They were neutralized, helpless, drifting testimonies to human superiority. The 3 human ships took positions around the conquered Thessian worlds. A single broadcast went out to the Skarn hegemony. Run! The Skarn, warriors who had never retreated, who had built their entire culture on conquest and strength, ran. They abandoned their conquered territories, pulled back to their core systems, and sent desperate messages to the council asking what these humans were. The council's response was simple. Pray they don't follow you. But humanity didn't follow. They never did. They made their point and stopped, returning the liberated worlds to their original inhabitants and withdrawing to their exclusion zone. This pattern repeated across the galaxy. Pirates, raiders, would-be conquerors, they all learned the same lesson. Attack the innocent, threaten the weak, break the peace, and humanity would respond. Not with conquest, but with such overwhelming force that surrender became the only option. The galaxy began to change. Species that had relied on military might for millennia found themselves obsolete. The Zelathi, still recovering from their humiliation at Kepler, reformed their entire society. The Vorthons, once the Council's military backbone, became philosophers and artists. When one species held ultimate power but chose not to use it, everyone else had to reconsider their priorities. Trade flourished. Without the threat of military conquest, smaller species emerged from hiding. Scientific advancement accelerated as resources previously spent on weapons went to research. The galaxy entered an unprecedented era of peace. All because humanity had said one word: run. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, now head of the Council's new Interspecies Research Division, presented her findings to a mixed audience of humans and aliens. The question everyone asks, she began, is how humanity developed such advanced technology in secret. The answer is simpler than you think. We never stopped being afraid. She activated a display showing Earth's history. Every species here achieved spaceflight after conquering their planet. You had no more predators, no more existential threats. But humans, we achieved spaceflight while still killing each other. We reached the stars not in spite of our violent nature, but because of it. The audience listened in rapt attention. When we made first contact, we saw species that had grown comfortable with their superiority. But we remembered our history. We remembered that today's ally could be tomorrow's enemy. So we prepared. We hid. We watched. And when you betrayed us, she looked directly at the Zelathi delegation, you validated every fear, every paranoid preparation. You proved we were right not to trust. But you showed mercy, an alien voice called out. Because we also remember that we're capable of more than destruction, Tanaka replied. The same species that builds weapons to crack stars also writes poetry. The hands that can unmake reality also heal the sick. That's what makes us dangerous, not our weapons, but our choice not to use them. In the human exclusion zone, new wonders emerged. Cities that existed in folded space-time, ships that could dance between dimensions, medical technology that made death a temporary inconvenience, all developed in the open now, no longer hidden. Some aliens were invited to visit, to learn. They returned with tales of impossibility made real. Humans had built paradise and defended it with technologies that made gods seem limited. But perhaps the most significant change came in how humanity was perceived. No longer the eager newcomers, no longer the weak youngsters. They were the guardians now, the species that kept the peace not through law or diplomacy, but through the promise of consequences. Criminal organizations dissolved rather than risk human attention. Warlike species turned to art and culture. The slave trade, a dark cornerstone of several civilizations, ended overnight when humanity announced that slavers would be hunted to extinction. Not prosecuted, not imprisoned, hunted to extinction. The message was clear. Ambassador Rodriguez, now Secretary General of the reformed Galactic Council, addressed the Assembly on the 10th anniversary of the Kepler incident. 10 years ago, this council betrayed humanity's trust. You answered our friendship with murder. You thought us weak because we chose peace. He paused, looking at each delegation. That betrayal was the greatest gift you could have given us. It forced us to show our true nature. It ended the masquerade, and in doing so, It created the peace that now exists. Some call us monsters. Some call us saviors. The truth is simpler. We're humans. We're capable of incredible destruction and incredible mercy. The difference between us and those who came before is that we know this about ourselves. The old council ruled through military might. When a stronger military appeared, that system collapsed. We propose something different. Rule through consent, protection through strength, peace through the promise that those who break it will face consequences beyond imagination. The vote was unanimous. The new Galactic Charter was signed, with humanity as its primary enforcer, not conquerors, but guardians, not rulers, but protectors. The ceremony ended with the dedication of a memorial, 800 names carved in quantum crystal, the civilians murdered at Kepler. Below them, an inscription in every known language. They died for profit. Their death birthed peace. May the galaxy never forget the price of betrayal. As the delegations departed, Admiral Chen stood before the memorial. Park, now a captain with his own ship, joined her. "Do you think they understand?" he asked. "Understand what?" "That we're still holding back. That everything they've seen is still just a fraction of what we're capable of." Chen smiled. "No. And let's hope they never give us reason to show them. The weapons we've revealed are terrible enough. The ones we haven't." She shrugged. "Some secrets should stay buried. In deep space, hidden from all sensors. Humanity's true fleet waited. Ships that could rewrite the laws of physics. Weapons that could unravel the fabric of space-time. Defenses that made them functionally immortal. All waiting for the day they might be needed. All hoping that day would never come. Because humanity had learned the ultimate lesson. True strength wasn't in using power, but in choosing when not to use it. They had become the monster in the dark that kept other monsters in check. The predator that protected the herd by its very existence. The galaxy had wanted to teach humanity its place. It succeeded, just not in the way it intended. Humanity's place was at the top, not as rulers, but as guardians, not as conquerors, but as the promise of consequences for those who would conquer others. And it all started with one word. One perfect response to betrayal and murder. Run. The word echoed through history, became legend, became myth. Parents told their children about the humans who could unmake stars but chose to make peace instead. Scholars studied the Kepler incident as the moment the galaxy changed forever. But in the human exclusion zone, life continued. Children played in parks that existed in 7 dimensions. Scientists pushed the boundaries of what was possible. Artists created works that made reality itself weep with beauty. They were humans. They had transcended their violent past while never forgetting it. They had become more than conquerors. They had become the guardians of peace, and in the depths of space, their sentinels waited, silent, watching, ready to respond to any threat with overwhelming force. The galaxy slept peacefully now. Because humanity was awake, and everyone knew what happened to those who woke the sleeping giant. They ran. As Admiral Chen left the memorial, she received a priority message. A new species had been detected at the galaxy's edge. First contact protocols were being initiated. "Orders?" Park asked. "Same as always," Chen replied. "We greet them with open hands and hidden weapons. We offer friendship and prepare for betrayal. We hope for the best and plan for the worst." "And if they prove hostile?" Chen's smile was both warm and terrifying. "Then we teach them the word that changed the galaxy?" The human fleet moved toward first contact, diplomats and dreadnoughts side by side. They went with hope, but prepared for war. They extended friendship, but kept their weapons charged, because they were human. They had learned that peace came through strength, that mercy required the ability to destroy, that true power lay not in conquering, but in choosing not to conquer. The galaxy had taught them to hide their nature. The Council's betrayal had taught them when to reveal it. And now, 10 years later, the peace that followed proved they had learned both lessons well. In schools across the galaxy, children learned about the Kepler incident, about the species that hid its strength until betrayed, about the response that changed everything. One word, 3 letters, infinite consequences. Run. It wasn't just advice anymore. It was a promise. Break the peace, harm the innocent, betray trust, and humanity would respond. Not with lengthy wars or gradual conquest, but with immediate, overwhelming force that defied comprehension. The bullies of the galaxy had been neutered, the conquerors had been conquered, the betrayers had been betrayed, all because humanity had been pushed too far, all because 800 innocents had died for greed. The Council had wanted to put humanity in its place. Mission accomplished. Humanity's place was as the guardian at the gate, the monster that kept other monsters at bay, the sleeping giant that everyone knew better than to wake. And so the galaxy turned, peaceful under the watchful eyes of a species that had mastered the art of war so completely that they no longer needed to wage it. The ultimate victory, the perfect peace, built on one word: run.